Well, hello, and welcome to another edition of JC Lee MD. Today I'm going to kick off a new part of my channel out of the Ivory Tower. I came to the States about 4 or 5 years ago on the Melania Trump visa, not for my modeling, but for my research in transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS, which I completed during my fellowship at the Temerity Center for Therapeutic Brain Intervention under the supervision of Drs. Daniel Blumberger and Jeff Daskalakis, who've been featured on CNN with Anderson Cooper. So I'm like 1 degree away from Anderson Cooper, so close. But on this series, I'm going to be doing a deep dive into some of the academic literature, specifically on TMS, because that's my mainstay. And that's how I got my alien of extraordinary ability kind of moniker through the O1. So to kick off this series, I'm going to be reviewing or just summarizing and presenting the 3D trial, which was a randomized non-inferiority trial led by Daniel Blumberger and colleagues in Toronto, comparing the standard 37.5-minute high-frequency left-sided TMS treatment to the newer varietal on the block that was first sort of looked into in the mid 2000s by Huang and colleagues in Taiwan, called intermittent theta-burst stimulation. And intermittent theta-burst, or iTBS, to the left side of the forehead, basically takes only 3 minutes as opposed to 37.5 minutes. And so Blumberger and colleagues were really interested in putting iTBS on the map and essentially conducted this statistical non-inferiority trial where they put 200 people through standard 6 weeks of high-frequency left-sided treatment and 200 or so people through intermittent theta-burst stimulation 6 weeks. So 5 days a week, six weeks in total. And all of the participants obviously at baseline matched up in terms of their overall level of depression as measured on the Hamilton Rating Scale for Depression, the Hamilton 17. And they were equally matched in terms of, pharmacological interventions that they were on, including benzodiazepines, antidepressants, and others. And that's important because Hunter and colleagues at UCLA, I believe in 2018 as well, showed that people who were on benzodiazepines tended to have slightly less efficacious responses or less beneficial responses after TMS. So this was a really highly calibrated, well-conducted study, huge and published in the Lancet. And what they found was that ultimately, in terms of response and remission, about 50% of the people in both the high frequency and the iTBS arms responded, meaning they had a greater than 50% reduction in their HRSD-17 score. About a third or so in each of the arms remitted, and there was essentially no statistical difference higher than the predefined margin of non-inferiority of 2.25 points on the Hamilton. So that is to say, intermittent theta-burst, this 3-minute treatment, was as effective or non-inferior statistically to high-frequency left-sided treatment. Now, if we do get into the weeds and things, there were a couple of things that were a bit different between the two. Although the Hamilton and the quick inventory of depression showed non-inferiority of iTBS, the IDS, actually, there was some discrepancy, and there were slightly more people who complained about pain on a visual analog scale related to intermittent theta-burst stimulation than with high-frequency left-sided treatment. But in fact, this didn't actually change the dropout rate, which was about 5 to 6% or so in both arms. I'm going off the top of my memory. And so this was a landmark trial, huge numbers in both arms, really an effectiveness trial. So these were people who were not like these clean, robots that were finally monitored and observed. These were real people in clinic getting treatment for treatment-resistant depression who were on medications and living life in the real world. And what they found was effectively that a 3-minute treatment, intermittent theta-burst or iTBS, was equivalent in efficacy or non-inferior to the to the 37.5-minute treatment. So you can imagine time over time, if you're coming in every day, in theory, theta-burst stimulation would be a reasonable choice, if for nothing else than to truncate or abbreviate the amount of time you're sitting in the chair. Now I know I've seen this play out in clinics. Most people are like, more is better. And if I'm gonna get, jump through the hoops of prior authorization and such to get to the TMS suite, I damn well will get the 37.5-minute treatment. And that's totally, a case by case and discussion with your provider kind of basis. But certainly I'm a big believer that theta-burst stimulation, improving access, and just improving the availability of healthcare is a huge kind of thing. Maybe that's the socialist Canadian in me. But I think theta-burst is probably going to be the way to go to pack in more therapeutic buck per minute, etc. So just to recap again, with the 3D study run by Blumberger and colleagues, published in 2018 in the Lancet, essentially what the researchers found in these 3 Canadian centers in Toronto and Vancouver was that iTBS, a 3-minute treatment, was non-inferior statistically in its outcome to high-frequency left-sided treatment, which requires 37.5 minutes a day. And effectively, this paves the way, and it actually paved the way for the FDA to clear iTBS, but effectively this paves the way for people to really choose to decide, do I want the shorter treatment or do I want the longer treatment? Either way, it seems, at least statistically in a conglomerate analysis, one is not better than the other. So until next time, happy reading and studying, and hopefully I'm gonna make a couple of brainstem folk out of the people who are watching this. And until next time, love yourself.